Only took them about 12 years, but finally we can wash off the taste of those dreadful live-action movies. Welcome Tekken fans, and thank you so much for clicking on my review for Tekken Bloodline. The 6-part anime series is now streaming on Netflix, and it loosely adapts the events of Tekken 3, where we follow a young Jin Kazama under the ruthless tutelage of his merciless grandfather Heihachi Mishima, on a quest for revenge to defeat the creature who killed his mother, the ancient demon Ogre. Hoping to draw the demon out, Jin competes against many others in the King of Iron Fist tournament and begins to unravel a hidden conspiracy connected to his family dating back to the original tournament. And I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I was the last of my friends to ever get a PlayStation. So when I finally got that PlayStation and I chose one game to buy it with, I chose Tekken 3. Before I ever got into Mortal Kombat, and I'm not even the biggest fan of Street Fighter, my fighting game that I played all through my childhood was the Tekken franchise. But specifically the game that introduced me to it was Tekken 3. And as a lover of this franchise, as a lover of movies and TV, with the channel that talks about them on a daily basis, I have been starved for over 20 years for some Tekken goodness to be brought to screen. And the keyword there is goodness. So I was rather excited when the first trailer for Tekken Bloodline dropped, and I saw that it was going to focus on my favorite character in the franchise, Jin Kazama, and the show mostly does justice to the story of this character. I don't mean just in faithfully adapting the game, but in bringing this character's struggle and his compelling story where he rides this moral gray line of good and evil to life. This entire narrative in the show is about Jin following his mother's advice, his Kazama bloodline, or his Mishima bloodline. And I thought all the characters were pretty fun to watch on screen. They're a little bit cliche, they're a little bit basic, the dialogue can be very hokey. Heihachi is a walking, talking catchphrase, man. Every line out of his mouth is a walking cliche that you completely expect from an evil sort of sensei from a classic 70s, 80s martial arts movie. But before you kick this review into high gear, I need you to start the conversation on Tekken Bloodline in the comments below. What is your history with Tekken? Were you a fan of this show? And what is your favorite game in the Tekken franchise? Anything and everything down there. And if you're enjoying this review, if you love movies and TV, this is the place to be. So consider clicking that subscribe button and you won't miss any future conversations on your favorite movies and TV. The show goes for that tone. It is very much a classic beat-by-beat tournament-style martial arts movie, or in this case, series. And I wasn't so big on the animation in the more intimate moments when characters are supposed to display emotions or when they're just talking, because movements and twitches in their faces and all that just look very mechanical, very stilted. But surprisingly, when it comes to the action, this show really delivers. The visuals in this are spectacular. Lots of bursting colors with all their powers straight out of the games when it comes to visual references. Even the composition of certain shots, it looks like you're supposed to have the player POV from Tekken 3. And it's really cool to see classic matchups like Jin versus King, or Jin versus Warang, Nina Williams versus Xiao Yu, and of course you have fights with Heihachi. A ton of fights with Heihachi because he's training his grandson, passing on to him those twisted lessons of ruthlessness that he passed on to someone else in the past, that the show semi-explores. Overall, this is a show that when it comes to the action, when it comes to the experience I remember having playing these games, it's awesome. It's a ton of fun. I love seeing these classic fights. I love seeing these classic visuals that I remember so heartwarmingly from my childhood. It is a show, however, that uses the story to get to the action and not the other way around. Even the way the show ends, and I'm not going to get into spoilers, feels very sudden. Something just happens, it's major, and instead of letting it sink in, showing us how it affects the characters, it just ends. And it's done. There's no leading on the story as if something could happen next. It's just telling this one story. You can tell the show is very focused on it. It just left me wanting more, honestly. The action is really good, but the story feels padded. It feels like it's just there to get to those big action moments, big reveals, big lines of dialogue between characters. It doesn't feel like the show really cares about the story that is in between the action beats. And this is all the more noticeable because in the beginning, when you have Jin and his mother before the ogre attack, the show takes its time with characters. It takes its time with story. But once that premise is out of the way, once the setup is done, it just handles story in the fastest way possible to get to the action. You will notice action occupies the bulk of the runtime here. And while I love my action, I always love my action to serve the story. And this show kind of does it the other way around. The story needs to get out of the way for the action to take place. That takes a little bit away from it in terms of emotional weight, in terms of stakes. And while I enjoyed it, I have fun. I just was never utterly connected to it emotionally. I know we're talking about Tekken, but to me, the characters in Tekken are great. The story in Tekken is great. And I think it deserved a little bit more care given onto the writing. It's certainly the best version of any show or movie that we got from Tekken, but it still leaves something to be desired. And that was disappointing. This is not a show that I thought was bad. I had my fun with it, but I just wanted more because the potential was there. From a visual standpoint, it's kind of the same thing. When it came to the action, I was all in. I was more than engaged onto the show. But other than that, I don't really think this animation style did any favor to these characters, especially when they are supposed to emote. They just constantly look like they have the same basic expression. One of them looks always angry, and that's Hayachi. Jin always looks intense. Warang always looks cocky, and everyone just has this one expression that defines them. So while it was cool to see Paul Phoenix and King and so many others, it was also disappointing to get Yoshimitsu making a cameo, and that's it. And there's nothing else for Yoshimitsu. So Tekken Bloodline doesn't quite have its story priorities straight, and while its characterizations are rather basic, it does boast some wonderful visual references to the classic games. The King of Iron Fist tournament is the real highlight here, with action and visuals superbly brought to life. I'm giving Tekken Bloodline a B-. That's my review on the Tekken Bloodline anime, but I need to know your thoughts, so drop them down in the comments below if you want to see another season. What game should they adapt? Anything and everything down there. And thank you so much for watching. Big thanks to my channel members for always supporting me. And until the next one, love each other and love the movies.